President Obama was speaking during an interview with The Atlantic magazine, which is really, I think, as part of an effort to define his legacy in foreign policy. And as part of that discussion, he suggested that David Cameron, the British Prime Minister, had essentially lost interest in Libya after the overthrow of Colonel Gaddafi, and that he and the British and the French were, to some extent, responsible for the anarchy that's now prevailing in Libya. And he also more broadly made a point that the Americans are a bit fed up with Europeans calling for America to take action all over the world, while actually constantly cutting their own military budgets and their willingness to do stuff around the world. I think this has to be seen as part of President Obama's efforts to define his own legacy with less than a year to go for him in the White House. He's keenly aware that a lot of people around the world and in the US blame him for the anarchy in the Middle East, say that he's been too weak and too passive. And I think he's keen to say, look, it isn't just the United States that's responsible for the state of affairs there, that it was the British and the French in particular that called for action on Libya and then really did very little afterwards. No, I don't think he did. I mean, I think that, of course, it will cause distress in Downing Street, but it'll cause distress partly because it's true. I mean, which is not to say that the Americans are blameless. And indeed, the Americans, in their statements afterwards, as they try to sort of slightly tidy up the diplomatic mess, acknowledge that the Americans too could have done more. But I think that Obama is alluding to a real problem for the West, which is that the US, after Iraq and after Afghanistan and after the financial crisis, is more reluctant to intervene around the Middle East. But the Europeans are actually cutting military budgets and less willing to do stuff. And as Obama pointed out, this is Europe's backyard. It is Europe that is receiving the refugees from Syria. It's Europe that's in the front line, really, of the effects of the collapse of the Middle East. So it's not unreasonable to expect the Europeans to perhaps do a little bit more and not always to look across the Atlantic for salvation. Of course, nobody likes to be criticised in public, but the fact is that the British and the French know that they need the Americans as the leading military power in the West, indeed in the world. And the Americans know that although the British and the French are kind of exasperating as partners, they're probably all they've really got in terms of reliable partners with some kind of claim to a global military presence. So the two sides will have to patch it up, and they will patch it up. But there are clearly underlying tensions beneath the surface, and those aren't going to go away either.